Good morning, friends. This is the fifth Sunday after Trinity, and the intent as God as peace. Through Trinity, and particularly the early Sundays of Trinity, we have these special intents. God, the angels, and so on and so forth. Things we've discussed on previous Sundays. And today, God as peace. And the collect has a very interesting phrase in it, which we just spent a couple of minutes thinking about. The collect reads, "Grant, O Lord, that the course of this world may soon be so peaceably ordered by thy governance, that thy church may joyfully serve thee in all godly quietness." Interesting. So, ordered by the governance of thy church, that is God's law, Christ's law, God's law, the same thing, may joyfully serve thee in all godly quietness. We might have a sense of what godly quietness feels like if we take time, perhaps first thing in the morning, to either just sit quietly, to read something, or not to read anything at all, but just to sit quietly, or to meditate, or just to ruminate over the day and what might be coming. And that quietness, that feeling of all-togetherness at the start of the day, before the busyness starts, we could describe that as godly quietness. We just feel we're in touch with things, and we feel we're in touch with the most important things, which is coming from our heart. The messages, the thoughts, the inspirations, sometimes the directions from our hearts. So we have this idea then of the world being somewhat of a messy place. So we don't need to be told that, do we? Anything doesn't always go as we originally intended. As great generals often say, after they've done months of planning in a battle, which you might say is the most intense coming together of people, they say a plan lasts up to the first moment of contact. So what's that saying is you can do all the planning you like. If it involves lots of people and lots of circumstances, be ready for anything. So, the world is not ordered necessarily by God's law, but we look for God's law in our life. So what's that got to do with God as peace? Well, when we're governed, when we have the governance of God's law, we start to experience godly quietness. Godly quietness. And out of the godly quietness comes a feeling of peace. We might call them the same thing, peace. And it's when we experience peace, that's when we're connected to the Christ within our hearts. That's when we're really in touch with information, guidance about what we should be doing for our unique path on earth. Our unique path. No one else can do what we do uniquely. We've got a gift and we should use it. We recall the story of the talents. The 3 servants with the talents. The 2 servants who developed their talents, forget about the play on words with money and so on. The servants who developed their inherent ability and brought it out were rewarded by their master. That's the Christ in the parable. The servant who said, "Oh, no, I'm not going to do anything about this. I'm just going to hide away. Life's pretty scary. I just sort of keep to myself." The master had no use for him. And so, such it is on earth, and particularly such it is in heaven. We've got talents, we've got abilities, we've got opportunities. We must develop them. How? In accordance with God's law. So in the epistle, which Matt read this morning, this is from St. Paul. St. Paul, pretty tough guy, writes pretty tough letters. If you're used to getting nice letters from your relatives, you got a letter from St. Paul, you'd know all about it. He'll let you know right down the line exactly what the story is. Particularly point of view, you recall his background. He once had a paid job of rounding up Christians. And then, when his name was called Saul, then he had this personal catharsis, we might call that in modern language. We might call it a mental breakdown. We might call it spiritual development. Often they all come at the same time. Mental breakdowns and spiritual development sometimes happen at the same time. He came out of it and then became the most travelled of all the Christians at that time. The most travelled. A lot of the apostles didn't travel as much as him, but he travelled all over the place. So he writes, "Brethren, ye have been called unto liberty." It's an unusual thing to say. He's writing to people who might be slaves, but he's describing what's expected in the world, and then he's describing what happens in our spiritual side, from the Christ side. And then he comes back again, "Thou shalt love thy neighbour as thyself." Always, always that emphasis is to love your neighbour as yourself. That fundamental commandment which Jesus gave. If we live in the Spirit, let us also walk in the Spirit. What does that mean? It means after the quiet time, perhaps in the morning, when we're feeling most peaceful, when we stand up and start to move, don't suddenly forget. Don't suddenly forget all the things that you were feeling. Carry that in your heart. Carry that recollection in your heart as you move through life. Carry that thought. And then the Gospel from St. John. Always St. John gives us the alternative view. Matthew, Mark, Luke sometimes tell the same story. John, much more, we might say, mystical or esoteric view. And we remember, if you're reading John or reading the other Gospels and something doesn't make sense, it's an immediate message to you, oh, stop. If it's not making sense, meaning you're measuring it by what happens in the world, stop and think about how it measures in the spiritual world, because that's the way he's writing. So, John is writing about these words from Jesus. This is just immediately before, at the end of Holy Week. Jesus is talking to the people. This is just either in the Last Supper or pretty close to it. "I will not leave you comfortless." This is Jesus talking to his disciples. "I will come to you, and because I live, you shall live also." And then he describes to them, if you see me, you see the Father. Everything I've taught you is the Father teaching me. So if you take that on board, you take me on board, and you take the Father on board. And if that's the case, and you keep my commandments, that is, you keep my directions, you keep my aspirational thoughts that I've given you, and you put them quietly into practice, just bit by bit every day, don't overdo it, just grow into it. As your spirit grows into this awareness, as your experience changes, and you start to see the influence of what I'm telling you, then I will dwell more and more in you. And this is Jesus talking, and if I'm more and more in you, the Father is more and more in you, and both of us will dwell in you. So, some of the disciples understood what that said, and some of them worried too much, and some of them overthink it too much, and maybe we overthink everything too much as well. So this is just to be rested on quietly when we're thinking, meditating in the morning, maybe saying some prayers in the morning, just quietly from the heart. And the heart instructs. The heart teaches us. And then right at the end of this passage, we then have the special blessing. "He that keepeth not my saying loveth me not." So do these things, Jesus says. Quiet little rap on the knuckles. Wake up, everybody. Everybody heard what I've said? Bang, rap on the knuckles. Don't forget. And then he says, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give unto you. Not as the world giveth, give I unto you." This is a special peace from the Christ. And when you feel it, you can feel it. And when you taste it, you know what you're tasting. And what comes with that? Let not your hearts be troubled, neither let it be afraid. So when we're very afraid and when we're very troubled, we should stop and say, we are not in the place we should be. If we're really, really troubled, let's put it aside and let's try and get in the place where Christ is. Peace. I want to go back to the peace, you say to yourself. I'm feeling trouble, I don't know what to do. I want to go back there. Now I'm going to sit quietly. I'm going to go back to the peace. Why? Because then you get your guidance. Then you get your direction. So these are very powerful lessons for us to learn. Very powerful techniques for us to practice. And as we practice them and get used to them, we get the feel of them. And when we get the feel of them, we're able to carry them into life more and more. And regardless of how hectic it gets, we still remember the taste, the numinous. Talk about the numinous, the feel, the light of it. That's what we want, just a little bit. And then, once we've got just a little bit, then we grow in that light. I commend these thoughts to you, friends. Try them out. See if they enrich your life.